The night sky over Earth was never meant to look like that. One moment it was filled with stars and calm darkness, and the next it split apart like glass being broken from the inside. A wall of silver light ran across the heavens, stretching from horizon to horizon. People in every city stopped what they were doing. Cars halted in the middle of roads. Children pointed upward in silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Out of the silver wall, something emerged. At first it looked like a shadow, but then the shadow grew until it became a ship larger than any mountain on Earth. It was not alone. Behind it came more ships, hundreds of them, in neat lines like soldiers marching through the sky. They did not send a warning. They did not speak in any language humans could hear. They simply began to descend in orbit the alien fleet known as the Oryx moved with perfect discipline. Each ship was shaped like a long blade with a dark hull that swallowed the light around it. The Oryx had done this before, on dozens of worlds. Their conquest always followed the same steps. First, cut the skies from the planet. Second, remove power and communication. Third, break the largest cities. Fourth, watch the survivors surrender. It had never failed. To them, Earth was only another target. Commander Zelvor stood inside the command hall of the lead ship, watching the blue and green planets spin beneath him. He had conquered worlds where the air was poison and where the ground boiled with lava. Compared to those, this world looked soft and unready. He estimated no more than 7 days before it would kneel on the surface. The first signs of invasion came without sound. Satellites went dark one after another. Television screens turned to static. In airports, lights flickered, then died. People looked up at the silent sky and felt their stomachs twist. In the distance, they could see the massive shadows moving above the clouds. Fighter jets scrambled to meet them, but disappeared from radar before anyone heard their engines again. Governments tried to speak to the intruders, but there was no reply. The Oryx did not talk to prey. The first Oryx scouts landed in remote places. They preferred to begin far from cities so they could set up control points without trouble. Forests of northern Canada, one Oryx drop pod slammed into a clearing and unfolded into a steel outpost. Black armored soldiers stepped out, carrying rifles that hissed with green energy. They scanned the trees but saw nothing. They moved like hunters, confident nothing could threaten them. That confidence did not last long. 3 hours later, only static came from the outpost. Second team was sent to investigate. They found no bodies, no weapons, no sign of a fight. The steel walls were scratched in strange patterns, almost like claw marks. One soldier swore he heard breathing in the trees, but his scanner showed nothing alive nearby. The team returned to base uneasy. It was the first time in years that an Oryx landing report included the word unknown in the mountains of South America. Another scout team vanished. Their last transmission was a strange sound in the background of their comms, a human voice whispering something in a language the Oryx could not translate. This was dismissed as interference, but in the next 48 hours, 5 more small squads went missing. Zelvor reviewed the reports with narrowed eyes. Humans were reacting faster than expected. Other species they had conquered took weeks to understand what was happening. These humans were already moving against them in cities the Oryx began. Cutting off resources, power grids were destroyed. Water treatment plants were disabled, roads were blocked, but the humans did not gather in panic like others. Instead, they disappeared into side streets, basements, forests, and hills. Every time the Oryx swept through an area looking for them, the humans were already gone. At night, the invaders saw flashes of movement in the dark, but could never catch anyone. They started calling the planet a ghost world. By the 4th day, Oryx Command expected to have at least one major city under control. Instead, they faced resistance on every level. In New York, groups of civilians used abandoned tunnels to move supplies under the enemy patrols. In rural areas, hunters took down Oryx scouts with weapons far simpler than plasma rifles. In coastal waters, fishing boats trailed alien patrol craft, then vanished into fog banks, leaving no trace. Every report returned to Zelvor with the same troubling note. The humans are adapting. The Oryx commander had never seen prey behave like this. They were not hiding because they were afraid. They were hiding because they were watching, learning, waiting. Each disappearance of an Oryx squad felt less like an accident and more like a test. Something was moving against them quietly and without fear. His officers suggested increasing patrols and bringing in heavier weapons, but Zelvor felt a slow unease creep into his mind. He had learned long ago that war was not always about who had more firepower. Sometimes it was about who could control the ground, and here on this strange blue planet, the ground itself seemed to belong to the humans. On the fifth night, an urgent message came from a unit stationed deep in the forests of Eastern Europe. Static filled most of the recording, but one sentence broke through clear. It was the voice of an Oryx soldier gasping in panic. "Commander, they are hunting us." Then the transmission cut and never resumed. Zelvor stood in the silent command hall, staring at the dead channel. For the first time in his career, he realized the invasion might not go as planned. Earth was not reacting like prey. That meant his war had just changed. The forest was dark and wet from an earlier rain. Single Oryx soldier stumbled between the trees, his armor scratched and his breathing sharp. Every sound around him seemed too close. Branches snapped somewhere behind him. He spun and fired into the shadows with his green energy rifle. The blast lit the trees for an instant, but revealed nothing. Silence returned like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then a voice spoke from somewhere he could not see, low and calm and human. "You're not the predator here." The soldier froze, his eyes scanning wildly. Another sound came from the side, quick light footsteps, then nothing. He fired again, but the shots hit only empty air. He realized too late that the voice had been a distraction. Something hit him hard from behind, and the world went black. The Oryx had never known fear like this. On every world they had taken, the prey ran and begged and hid in groups, but here small human teams were hunting them one by one. Commander Zell. Vor reviewed reports that made no sense. Patrols disappearing without a fight, bases emptied overnight. Armored soldiers found without their weapons, stripped of gear. The humans were moving without being seen. Worse, they were choosing the fights, not the Oryx. This was not random resistance. This was strategy. In the forests of North America, hunters used the land like it was part of them. They set traps so quiet and invisible that even Oryx scanners missed. Them, in the deserts, human fighters used heat and dust to cripple Oryx optics. In icy mountains, they led alien patrols into blizzards where their armor froze and their weapons jammed. Every climate that slowed the Oryx seemed to make the humans faster. Zalvor realized Earth itself was their Alawan Oryx squad patrolling. A ruined town in Eastern Europe found themselves moving through narrow alleys between broken buildings. The streets were empty, but windows above them held dark shapes. They kept their rifles ready, scanning for heat signatures. Then they began to hear it. The sound of footsteps on the rooftops keeping pace with them. When they turned to look, nothing was there. When they moved faster, the footsteps did too. One soldier fired at the noise but saw no target. Then the squad leader felt something tug his shoulder. He turned and saw a thin wire looped around him. It yanked hard, dragging him into the shadows of a doorway. The rest of the squad opened fire, but by the time they reached the doorway, it was empty. Only his dropped rifle remained. The Oryx were not used to weather as an enemy, but Earth's weather fought for the humans. In tropical jungles, heavy rain drowned Oryx drones and caused their weapons to misfire. In freezing tundra, their energy packs lost power in hours. In cities, fog and smog hid human movements. The invaders were trained to fight armies in open battle, not invisible hunters in shifting terrain. Zelvor ordered thermal drones to track human fighters, but the humans learned quickly to mask their heat with mud water and even piles of snow by. The end of the second week, the Oryx had taken no major cities and lost dozens of patrols. Morale began to drop. Soldiers whispered of ghosts and shadows. They spoke of hearing human voices in the night, even when no humans were there. Some refused to patrol alone. Others doubled their ammo loads and still vanished without using a single shot. For the first time in Oryx history, the invaders avoided certain areas entirely, not because they could not take them, but because they did not want to enter on. The ground humans no longer stayed hidden in fear. They moved closer to Oryx positions, testing their defenses. Farmers and fishermen reported strange noises near alien bases, then entire enemy units went missing the next night. Even unarmed civilians found ways to sabotage Oryx machines with nothing but tools and scrap. The humans were not waiting to be rescued. They were fighting back with everything they had. Starforge began to understand this was not a war like the others. This was a hunt, and his soldiers were the prey. The humans did not attack in daylight with banners and drums. They came in silence and darkness in ways his army could not predict. They were patient, and they were learning faster than he thought possible. The reports he read now carried a single tone that worried him more than any weapon. His soldiers were afraid. Afraid of a species they had called weak, afraid of a planet that seemed alive, afraid that they might never leave it. In the last report of the night, Starforge read the words that confirmed his fears, written in the blood of an Oryx soldier. On the wall of an abandoned outpost were 3 words in human language: "We are coming." The desert stretched for miles in every direction, flat and silent under the burning sun. An Oryx base stood in the middle of it like a black spike driven into the sand. Tall walls shimmered with energy shields. Watchtowers scanned the horizon with long-range optics. From above it looked secure, unbreakable. Inside the walls, soldiers moved between supply crates and weapon racks, certain no human could approach without being seen. The heat scanners showed nothing alive for kilometers. The guards relaxed in the heavy stillness, unaware that something was already moving toward them. Beneath their feet, under the sand, a group of human fighters lay hidden, their bodies covered in layers of cloth and dust to match the desert. They had been there for hours, not moving, not speaking, letting the heat of the day hide their presence from alien sensors. When the wind shifted, one of them raised a hand and the others tensed. The signal came and the desert floor erupted. Dozens of shapes rose from the sand like ghosts of the earth itself. The first Oryx guard barely had time to shout before a shadow grabbed him and pulled him down into a swirl of dust. The alarm klaxon screamed, but they were too late. The humans struck fast and with purpose. They avoided the strongest points of the base and targeted the supply lines. Explosives buried in sand tore open the fuel storage tanks, sending fire into the sky. 2 fighters slipped inside the walls through a maintenance hatch the Oryx thought was locked. Within minutes, the base's main power core was rigged to detonate. Oryx soldiers fired wildly into the shifting haze, but their shots found only empty air. The desert was alive with movement they could not track. Some swore they saw figures vanish into the ground itself, but by the time they aimed, the sand was still again. When the fight was over, the humans were gone, leaving only the wreck of a base. Smoke poured into the sky, visible for miles. In the ruins, Oryx officers found something else, a small metal tag stamped with human words. First of many. Commander Starforge studied the tag in his hands later that night, his jaw tight. This was no random raid. This was a message. In other parts of the world, similar strikes began. Human teams targeted fuel depots, communication hubs, and supply ships. They attacked at night during storms or in thick fog where Oryx vision was weakest. Civilians became scouts carrying information about enemy patrol routes. Even children learned to pass coded messages without speaking. Every attack seemed coordinated, as if an invisible network was guiding them. The Oryx were forced to spread their forces thinner to guard all the places the humans might hit. This only made them more vulnerable. One evening, an Oryx dropship carrying food and medical supplies was flying low over the ocean when the radar showed a small fishing boat ahead. It seemed harmless, so they ignored it. Minutes later, the dropship's engines failed without warning. It crashed into the waves and sank in under a minute. Later scans revealed the fishing boat had vanished entirely. Only a floating net remained, tangled with pieces of alien tech. No one could explain how a fishing boat had disabled a warship, but rumors spread quickly among the soldiers. They started calling the humans shadow divers. The most shocking event came when a small Oryx scout ship simply did not return from its mission. Hours later, the same ship appeared again, but this time it was flying toward an Oryx base at full speed, with all weapons firing. The base's defenses destroyed it, but the wreckage revealed the truth. The ship had been captured by humans who had turned its systems against its own kind. The thought of humans using Oryx technology unsettled Starforge in a way no weapon ever had. If they could do this once, they could do it again. As the days passed, the Oryx began losing control of large regions. Forests, deserts, mountains, and even small towns were slipping out of their grasp. It was not just the fighting, it was the constant feeling of being watched, of being tested. Soldiers reported seeing human eyes in the dark just before an attack. They spoke of traps that seemed to appear from nowhere. Some claimed the humans could smell fear. Zelvor dismissed such talk in public, but in private, he began to wonder how much of it might be truth. High Council of the Oryx Empire sent a direct message to Zelvor. Their patience was running thin. Conquer this planet, they ordered, or erase it. The thought of erasing a world had never troubled Zelvor before, but now something in him hesitated. Destroying a planet meant victory without honor, and if word spread that the great Oryx commander had failed against humans, it would be a shame his family name would never survive. Still, as he looked over the map of Earth and the growing red zones where Oryx control had collapsed, he knew the choice might soon be taken from him late. One night a scout from the front line sent a brief transmission before his signal cut off. His voice was urgent, almost broken. "They're not defending anymore," he said. "They're coming for us." The channel went silent, and Zelvor stood alone in the command hall, listening to the hum of the ship, wondering if the war had already slipped out of his hands. The Oryx officer woke to a silence so deep it felt wrong. The constant hum of the base's generators was gone. No voices came from the coms. Even the usual click and hiss of alien machinery had vanished. He stepped out of the barracks into the cold night air and froze. The base was empty. Tents, vehicles, weapons all still there, but no soldiers. The gates stood open, swaying slightly in the wind. He walked through the camp, calling out in his language, but only the wind answered. Then he noticed the walls were covered in human handprints, hundreds of them in mud, ash, and blood. The disappearance was not an isolated event. Across the planet, Oryx positions were vanishing overnight. Bases that had been heavily guarded in the evening were found abandoned by morning. No alarms. Signs of battle. Just the strange marks, handprints, carved messages, or crude symbols that the Oryx could not understand. Soldiers began refusing night duty in certain zones. They claimed the humans moved differently after dark, faster and quieter than before. Rumors spread that Earth itself was helping them, that the forests and the cities were alive and guiding them. The humans had entered a new phase of the war. They no longer fought openly in small bursts. They attacked the mind. At night, loudspeakers hidden in ruined buildings played distorted human voices, sometimes singing, sometimes laughing. Oryx guards would fire into the darkness and hit nothing. When they sent drones to investigate, the sounds moved, leading them into traps. Supply convoys started finding their own crates filled with dirt or animal bones instead of food. Oryx, who had never seen a human, began to feel hunted in one mountain region. The Oryx commander ordered a patrol into the forests to find the source of these attacks. The patrol never returned. Days later, their armor and weapons were found hanging from tree branches like trophies. A single boot was left in the center of the clearing with a piece of paper inside. Written in human script were the words, "We are closer than you think." The handwriting was neat and slow, as if the writer had taken their time while fear spread on the ground. Human hacking teams were attacking the Oryx from another direction. They broke into alien communication systems, sending false orders that pulled units away from their positions. Entire fleets moved to defend locations that did not exist. Ships in orbit received emergency landing requests from bases that had already been destroyed. The Oryx command network was fracturing, and no one could be sure which orders were real anymore. Zelvor himself received a priority distress call from a sector he knew was uninhabited. It took him hours to confirm it was fake. By then, too, real bases had fallen in the deep ocean. Oryx submarines searching for human hideouts began to vanish. When wreckage was found, it showed signs of being dragged along the seabed before breaking apart. No one knew how humans could attack underwater with such precision, but the survivors whispered about shadow divers again. The name stuck, becoming another reason soldiers avoided coastal patrols. The most dangerous change was how quickly the humans learned from captured technology. In less than a month, they had adapted alien power cells for their own weapons. In some areas, human rifles now fired beams that could pierce Oryx armor. In others, human drones flew low under the alien sensors, carrying stolen explosives straight into patrol routes. The Oryx had always believed their technology gave them an unbeatable advantage. Now they were watching it turned against them. Zelvor stood in the command hall studying a map of Earth. The red marks of lost territory were spreading faster every day. His officers argued over whether to call for reinforcements, but reinforcements meant waiting for ships to arrive through the silver wall in the sky, and the humans had already begun studying that wall. Their stolen scout ship had scanned its structure. If they found a way to control it, the entire Oryx fleet here could be trapped forever. That fear became real sooner than anyone expected. One night, without warning, a massive explosion shook the skies above. An Oryx warship fell from orbit, trailing fire, crashing into the ocean with a sound that echoed for miles. Before the fleet could recover, human boats were already on the water, heading straight for the wreck. Zelvor ordered them destroyed, but the currents and fog shielded the boats. Within hours they were gone, leaving the Oryx ship stripped of anything useful. That night, Zelvor could not sleep. He stood alone at the viewing window, staring down at the planet. This was not like any war he had fought. Every day he felt the Oryx becoming smaller while the humans grew larger in the shadows. He realized they were no longer just defending their home. They were preparing for something bigger, something that would strike at the heart of his army. And when it came, he might not be ready to stop it. The silver wall in the sky had been silent since the invasion began, a constant shining wound across the darkness of space. But now it was moving. Lightning crackled inside it, bright enough to turn night into day. On the ground, people stopped. Whatever they were doing to stare upward, Oryx ships in orbit shifted formation nervously, their long dark hulls tilting toward the disturbance. Then the gate began to pulse, slow at first, then faster, as if it was breathing. Commander Zelvor's comes filled with urgent voices from fleet captains. Something was wrong with the jump gate. And the readings were not from their side. They were coming from Earth high over the Pacific Ocean. An Oryx patrol ship spotted movement, a stolen Oryx vessel, small but armed, racing toward the gate at full speed. If it had no fear of being hit, the patrol opened fire, green blasts slicing through space. But the stolen craft dodged with sudden violent turns. It was not flying like an Oryx crew did. It was flying like someone who didn't care if the ship survived. The comms picked up human voices inside, calm and focused. They were speaking in short, clipped words the Oryx couldn't translate fast. Enough. The stolen ship reached the gate before the patrol could stop it on the ground. Human fighters had been working for weeks to prepare this moment. Engineers and mechanics had torn apart, captured Oryx power cells, and reassembled them into unstable reactors. The stolen ship carried them straight into the heart of the gate's control field. When the collision happened, it wasn't just an explosion. It was like space itself was tearing. The silver wall shuddered and began to collapse in on itself, shrinking faster and faster until it was gone. The gate had closed, and with it, every Oryx reinforcements ship still outside was cut off forever. The sudden isolation hit the Oryx hard. Supplies from their empire stopped instantly. The wounded could no longer be evacuated. Command ships in orbit now faced the terrifying truth they were stranded on a hostile world. On Earth, human teams moved in almost immediately. They targeted stranded Oryx outposts, striking before the aliens could regroup. Without steady reinforcements, the once unbreakable invaders began to lose ground even faster in the ruins of a city in Asia. A group of Oryx soldiers tried to hold a fortified street against advancing humans. Their plasma fire lit the smoke-filled air, but the humans kept moving forward. They used stolen Oryx shields as cover, advancing step by step until the aliens were forced to fall back. From above, it looked like water filling cracks in stone, slow but unstoppable. And in the middle of the battle, a strange thing happened. The humans stopped firing and let the last few Oryx escape. It wasn't mercy, it was a message. The survivors would carry their fear back to every unit they met at sea the humans used. Their advantage in numbers and stealth. Small boats packed with explosives swarmed Oryx ships that were too large to maneuver quickly. Others used hidden underwater mines to force alien vessels into narrow passages where they could be trapped. The Oryx had always relied on open space and clear skies. Now they were being dragged into close, messy fights where their size worked. Against them in orbit, Zalvor watched the reports pile up. Entire zones of Earth were now unreachable without heavy losses. Oryx troops avoided traveling in small numbers. Civilians, once ignored by the aliens, were now bold enough to walk openly, in areas the Oryx used to control. And the worst part was what his scouts reported from captured human camp stables, covered with alien weapons neatly cleaned, and piles of Oryx armor stripped from fallen soldiers. The humans weren't just surviving, they were collecting trophies. Zalvor considered ordering an all-out retreat to the remaining strongholds, but pulling back too far meant giving the humans space to organize even larger attacks. Staying spread out meant his army would continue to be picked apart. For the first time in his career, he had no good choice. And then, a human transmission. Cut through all Oryx channels, overriding even his command feed. The voice was calm, steady, and translated into Oryx speech with perfect clarity. Now, it's our turn, the message repeated again and again across the planet. Oryx soldiers froze when they heard it, thought it was a threat. Others thought it was a promise. Zalvor understood it was both. He looked at the shrinking map of his control zones and knew that whatever the humans were planning next would not just push his forces back. It would break them completely. And there was nothing he could do to stop it from coming. Zalvor stood on a low hill as the smoke from his last forward base curled into the gray sky. The base had been his strongest position in the region, packed with weapons, fuel, and soldiers trained for close combat. Now it was nothing but broken walls and blackened steel. He had watched it fall in less than an hour. The humans had come from every side at once, silent, fast, and without mercy. He could no longer reach half his army on coms. Some units had gone dark days ago. Others had sent only brief, panicked messages before cutting off forever. The commander had once believed Earth would kneel in 7 days. Now, after months of fighting, he could feel the planet tightening around him like a trap from the tree line ahead. Movement caught his eye. Dozens of human fighters stepped into the open. Their faces were smeared with ash, their eyes calm and steady. They moved like they owned the ground they walked on. At their front, a man carried something long and folded in his hands. When he reached Zalvor, he dropped it at the alien's feet. It was an Oryx banner torn from the burning base. The humans said nothing. They didn't need to. The message was already clear across the planet. The final strikes were hitting the remaining Oryx strongholds. In the deserts, human teams tunneled beneath heavy gun emplacements and brought them down from below. In the mountains, snipers picked off Oryx officers before they could give orders. At sea, fishing boats and stolen patrol craft boxed in. Last alien warships, forcing them to surrender or sink. The Oryx had no safe zones left. Every movement was watched. Every supply run was intercepted. The invaders who had once arrived like a wall of steel were now scattered, and desperate Texelver's forces tried to regroup in the ruins of an old city. Using collapsed buildings as cover, the humans moved through the streets like they had been born there. Every shot the Oryx fired was answered from an angle they couldn't see. Explosions shook the ground, and dust rolled through the air in choking waves. Within minutes, the aliens were cut off from one another, pockets of resistance swallowed by the advancing human fighters. No prisoners were taken, except for one. Commander himself, they bound Zalvor, but did not harm him. Instead, they led him through the ruins toward a waiting vehicle. The streets were lined with humans watching in silence. Some carried rifles, others only tools or scraps of Oryx armor. All of them had the same steady gaze. The commander had seen hatred in the eyes of enemies before, but this was something different. It was certainty. These people knew they had. Already when the humans brought him to their base, they did not lock him away. They placed him in front of a transmission unit and connected it directly to the Oryx fleet's remaining channels. A human stood beside him and spoke slowly into the translator, the words sharp and deliberate. Tell your High Council that we are not prey. You will leave this planet. You will never return." Zalvor said nothing at first, but the human's eyes held him until he finally gave a short nod. The message was sent exactly as ordered. The Oryx ships in orbit began to retreat, their dark shapes pulling away from Earth and disappearing into deep space. No shots were fired. No threats were made. They simply left. Zalvor was taken to one of the last shuttles, his hands unbound. The humans did not even watch him go. They had already turned away, already thinking about rebuilding, he realized, with a cold weight in his chest that they knew he would deliver the warning for them. And that warning would spread far beyond his empire months later. In a council chamber on a distant world, the Oryx High Council listened in silence as Zalvor described the war. He spoke of forests that swallowed soldiers whole, oceans that dragged ships into the deep, skies that closed against reinforcements. He told them about the humans who fought without fear, who learned faster than any prey had a right to, and who turned every advantage into a weapon of their own. And when he was done, he gave them the words he had been ordered to repeat. "We are not prey far away in the dark corners of space." Other empires heard the story too. Some laughed at it, calling it the shame of the Oryx, but others listened more carefully. They marked the blue and green planet on their maps and moved it from their list of targets to a list called dangerous. And for a long time after, no one dared to test whether the humans' warning had been an empty threat